Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Matt the Franchise podcast. I am your host. I am Matt the Franchise, coming at you not from the place that you normally see me at. That's right, we're in a new place this time around. Welcome to Studio 454. This is a neat little studio place that I'm using to set up today's event. And also now, going forward, this is going to be the place where we do the podcast at now. It's a more sophisticated spot. It feels more professional. You know, it's a little something we got going on here. So I just want to say, first off, thank you to everybody who has taken the time to watch the first episode of the podcast on my YouTube channel. If you haven't already, make sure you go watch that one first before you go see this one. And I've actually got my phone, just like I did last time. I have my live stream going on as well on TikTok right now, so they can see what's going on as well too on their side also. So thank you guys again for those who actually watched the first one. Thank you all for checking it out, and thank you for supporting, by the way. It means the absolute world to me. So thank y'all. So today's topic is going to be a little bit different this time around. We're going to start digging into, the depths of my world a little bit. That's a little bit that you guys don't really know too much about. So the first thing, we're going to be talking about a couple things here tonight. We are going to be talking about my music tastes and also video games, because I figured those are two topics that people want to talk about. So we're going to dive into that here. And of course, I've got the live stream. If y'all want to ask questions, feel free to throw out your music and video game questions out in the chat as well, so I can see them. So we can also just make sure we've got some solid content for you guys here. Now, I can say this much, before I actually was really, really deeply into ChuckECheese like I am, one of the big things I was really into back when I was younger was definitely video games. My parents, before I was born, they had a Nintendo Entertainment System before I was around, and they used to play a lot, because when I got old enough, I was like about maybe 3 or 4, I was able to start playing myself, and I remember how much I loved my Nintendo Entertainment System. It was such a great thing to have, honestly. Somebody's asking, did you play the Super Mario games? Absolutely. Like those are like the core of my childhood, basically. I would play Mario 1 and 3 probably the most as far as game go. I did like Mario 2, but that one always seemed like it was a bit difficult when it came to playing wise. It was always just a challenge to play that one. And I don't know, for some reason that game I would always be like rage quitting basically at a young age, more or less. And it was just one of those things where it was like, oh man, I don't know how much more of this I can handle, honestly. So those are my early days of playing games and stuff like that, was playing Mario's 1, 2, and 3. 1 was one of my favorites, obviously. 2 is a good one, but 3 is one of my favorite video games of all time. There's always going to be at least 1 or 2 games from every Nintendo console that are my favorites. Another one, it's a very, very, very obscure, it's a very obscure game, but there is a game on the NES that was called McKids. And it's basically Super Mario 3, but with McDonald's characters, basically. And I just have so many fond memories of playing that game specifically, even though I know I absolutely sucked at playing that game. Like, I was never very good at it. And honestly, I just really felt like I was like not as good as I should be. But even now, I got the game or played the game recently at a retro arcade around here, and needless to say, I'm still very bad at it. I could barely get past the first world. Because there's so many, it's like a very obscure game. Like, if you've never played it before, you probably never even heard of it until this podcast. So, like, for me, it was just like it was a really tough game. But there was another game I really liked on the NES system as well that my parents had, which was Super Dodgeball. And it was a very basic game, but it was a lot of fun to play. And I remember very vividly being decent at it. And then I remember buying it for the because they eventually put it on like the Wii console, like the retro consoles and all that. And I remember very vividly being like playing that game and actually being pretty decent at it, like when I was older. So but yeah, so like that was another thing I was really into as well too. Then eventually we got a Super Nintendo. I remember the Super Nintendo specifically. There are two things from my 6th birthday that I remember getting. And my 6th birthday to me is actually a core memory, because I know I've talked about this before on live before, but I still remember like the days leading up to that birthday for some reason. And I still remember like just the anticipation of going to ChuckECheese that day specifically. And there were two items that I got for my birthday that still exist in my life to this day. And one of them being my Super Nintendo and some of the games that I got for that system as well, which was, I believe, was Mario All-Stars. And it was Mario All-Stars and trying to remember what the other one. So I know Super Mario World, Super Mario All-Stars. I think those were, and then Mario Kart too. We got Mario Kart as well. And I remember getting those games specifically, and I remember how excited I was. And the other item that I got was also one of my first DJ lights. Well, not really DJ lights, but it was a light. It was my traffic light. I do have it still. It's actually part of Jasper's Giant Star Diner setup. It's on the other side of Jasper. Normally you don't see it whenever we do the lives, but if you look at the actual videos, you'll see it in the background, and you'll know that it's like something, it's something that's really important. So, but yeah, so as far as that goes, that was something those are two items that I still remember getting for those birthdays. You've noticed it. See, there we go. We got somebody who noticed the traffic light before at one point. So yeah, that's what that is. It's not, that piece is not actually a piece of like a ChuckECheese stage or anything like that. That's an actual thing that I got for my birthday when I was 6. And that is the exact traffic light. It's still the original one that I got when I was a kid. And it's still there, and it still works. Barely, but it still works. But yeah, like it's the very first item that I remember getting as a kid. And I remember how excited I was to like getting a traffic light, because during that time of my life when I was a kid, I used to I was intrigued by just lights in general. So like, but like obviously that never changed, as you can tell. So, basically we, just never outgrew it. And, just kind of one of those things, it still works to this day. So that was just, but getting back onto the topic though, we also, like I said, I had gotten a Super Nintendo for that birthday specifically too. And again, that birthday, like I said, has a lot more meaning for me, but we'll talk more about that whenever we do the birthday topic, because there's a lot to unravel with my birthday history, like with going to ChuckECheese and stuff. That's a whole different monster for a different podcast. But anyways, getting back on topic. So then I got the Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo to me was a very, very important console to me, because it's what really got me invested into video games at the time. I remember I had, of course, Mario Kart, Super Mario World, Super Mario All-Stars. I believe I had the Aladdin game. I remember I had the Aladdin game because I would always use I knew the code to get to the final boss on that one. And also, I'm trying to think, Yoshi's Cookie was another game. It's kind of that one's kind of an obscure game. I rarely ever see that one ever pop up anymore. Because there's also a version of it also for the Nintendo system, but there's also a version for it also for the Super Nintendo as well. And the version I had was for the Super Nintendo. There was also even like a Game Boy version of it too, which Game Boy is a whole different monster, which we'll get into that here in just a moment too. But with Super Nintendo, like some of the other games I remember getting were, of course, my favorite game of all time, Donkey Kong Country specifically. Donkey Kong Country is one of my absolute favorite games, but specifically number 2. For me, the music that David Weiss made, I believe that's his name. Hopefully I'm not messing that up. the music he made for that game was absolutely amazing. So like I really genuinely loved the soundtrack to that game. Like sometimes when I was cleaning my room when I was a kid, I would just I would play a level and then pause it and then just let the music play while I was working on my room. Of course, I would never get anything done because then I'd be too excited to want to get on the game or whatever and just kind of go from there. Did I ever have the Lion game for Super NES? I did not. That was one of those games I really wanted but never got, unfortunately. I'm trying to think what other cool games I had. I played Super Mario Kart a lot. That was one of those ones I really got into. That one was a lot of fun to play and stuff like that. I absolutely love that game. Trying to think but yeah, I spent a lot of time specifically on Donkey Kong Country specifically because that to me was like one of those games that I could just continuously play over and over again and just never get tired of it. And it was just one of those. It's just one of those games that just never gets old. Like as much as I play it, it just never gets old to me personally. But I'm trying to think like what else. Those are basically the main games. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Mario Kart I spent a lot of time on as well too because I remember playing that one a lot of the time. Favorite game. So earlier I was talking about so basically I'm rating all of my favorite games based on the consoles that I had. So for NES it was definitely Super Mario Brothers 3, but that's also one of my top tier favorite games of all time. A close second on that system was also McKids, which is again a very, very obscure game that not a lot of people know about. It's a McDonald's based game basically, but it's like Super Mario in the style of Super Mario Brothers 3 basically. Also another game that so back to Super Nintendo. So definitely Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 and number 1 are all my favorites. So the Donkey Kong series in general is my absolute favorite. Can never go wrong with the Donkey Kong series. Trying to think. Obviously Mario Kart, Super Mario World, and also Mario All-Stars are all great games. So was Aladdin. Aladdin was also a great one too. And then so now we're gonna move on to handheld consoles, which is gonna be Game Boy, and I'll go ahead and include it'll be Game Boy specifically. One game that I always played a lot of on the Game Boy was Super Mario Land 2. That was definitely one of those games that I put a lot of hours into. It's one of the few that I actually did beat as well when I was a kid. I remember I would spend a lot of time. I remember I spent a lot of time on Super Mario Land 2, and I also spent a lot of time also on Donkey Kong Land as well. Donkey Kong Land was another one that I also had a lot of time on, and also Pokemon as well too. I had red and blue, and then I also had yellow as well too. I had yellow. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that because if she hears me say this, she's going to kick my butt. My sister had yellow. I had blue. I had blue and red, and then my sister had yellow. But as far as I love Pokemon Blue though. That was the one I spent the most time on. But yeah, my sister had yellow, but eventually I inherited that game after she stopped playing video games basically, or doesn't play them as much. Well, I take that back. My sister is now a Twitcher. Like she's on Twitch now. So my sister plays games on her downtime from her actual job. So yeah. And as far as I would definitely say Pokemon Blue is probably my favorite game. Actually, I take that back. Blue is definitely my favorite game on the NES, on the Game Boy, not the NES. Duh. But so yeah, Game Boy Color, that kind of is definitely a different monster in itself. I would definitely say Pokemon Silver is going to be my favorite on the Game Boy Color specifically. I still remember I would play that game all the time. And I remember living in Corpus Christi, we would travel to San Antonio a lot. And the travel from Corpus to San Antonio, is usually about roughly, give or take, about 2 hours roughly. 2.5 if it's really bad traffic. 1.5 depending on how fast you're going. And I remember very vividly that there was like I would just sit there and play, and I would get lost in it, and like I would just forget everything else that was going on at that time. And so I would always just be lost in my game. And I remember one time I let somebody borrow my Game Boy while we were on a trip, and they accidentally deleted my gaming progress, which I was so disappointed about. Like, it was bad. I was like, well, that's pure sadness right there. But as far as that goes, so that was the main thing, was because I was listening to my CD player, and I didn't want to be like, share, I wanted to share my stuff with everybody who was there. So, but yeah, so I remember very vividly that was one thing with it. Oh man, yeah, my Game Boy Color, I was obsessed with that too. Like I had so many hours on that, so many AA batteries that were wasted on that thing. Oh man, I can't even begin to tell you how much I wasted on that. But let's see, I'm trying to think. And then over to the Game Boy Advance. I didn't play that one as much, but I did play Pokemon Ruby a lot on that one. That was a game I put a lot of time into on that one. And also Super Mario Advanced 2, or no, 4. Super Mario Brothers 3 is, again, because it's a Super Mario 3 game. I was obsessed with that as a kid. So, did you have the squiggly light for it? Actually, I did have a light for it for my original Game Boy, my big bulky one. So with that one, I actually had like this big old light that you put on top, and you'd have to put additional AA batteries in it to make it run. And then, have that on, at nighttime when you couldn't see the screen and all that. Just like with, until, the Game Boy Advance came out, when it actually had a lit up screen in the back, or the SP, I should say. I've definitely put a lot of time into my Game Boy Advance SP for sure. That was really the last of the handheld stuff that I played. After that, I never got a 3DS. I never got any of the newer consoles or the 3D or the Nintendo DS, I should say. I never got the DS or the Nintendo 3DS or anything like that. That was kind of the time that I stopped playing, stopped playing the handheld games and just kept what I had at that point, because honestly, a lot of the newer games just did not really interest me very much. So I was like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and just, do what we got to do here. It's just, but I remember it was like, okay, we're going to move on to do other things. And then, when it came back to consoles, the next console I got was the GameCube. Now with the GameCube, there are definitely a handful of games that I absolutely love. And there's actually a really cool story I actually want to share. And because right now we are recording this the Saturday of WrestleMania, I figured this is the perfect opportunity to share a wrestling story here in between this, in this as well. And for those who don't know, I am also a humongous WWE fan. So I truly hope that Cody Rhodes finishes the story tonight. And I really hope that all the other people that I'm hoping for win tonight as well too. There's a lot. It's an amazing and packed show tonight. This is being filmed the night, like a couple hours before WrestleMania starts. So I haven't seen the results yet. So we'll be, by the time this video comes out, it'll probably already be, WrestleMania will have already happened. WrestleMania 40, by the way. But so they got the GameCube. Now I have 3 games on that system that were my absolute favorites. The first of them being, of course, Super Smash Brothers, one of the absolute best games of that era. Is the GameCube with Super Smash Brothers Melee specifically. I played that game so much. I remember I would go over to my friend's house, and we'd always have like tournaments and stuff, and we'd see who was the best player and stuff like that. Um, wait a minute. I think I actually I bypassed the 64. Whoops. See, that's the fun part about doing these podcasts. I can still go back. So we'll talk about the 64 after this here. I'm going to go ahead and share this first. So with the Nintendo, with the GameCube, Super Smash Bros. Melee was one of my absolute favorite games of all time. I put so many hours into that game. It was definitely one of those classics. Another game that I put a lot of time into was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Now, another little story about the GameCube is that during this time frame, I wanted to maybe try out the Sega Saturn. If anybody, or not the Sega Saturn, the Sega Dreamcast, that's what it was, the Dreamcast. I was going to do the Dreamcast specifically. And when I finally had the money to actually afford to buy the Dreamcast, they had discontinued them. And I was like, that's a bummer. That was like it was like the week before that they were about to, like, I finally gotten all the money saved up to get the console. And then a week later, they announced that they were discontinuing it basically. I was like, wow, that is a serious inconvenience right there. I was like, sad times in the kingdom. So, so basically I was like, okay, well, then I'll just get the GameCube then. I'll just save up for the GameCube because the GameCube was going to be coming out really soon, like during the time frame of all this. So I was like, okay, well, let's just save it for the GameCube and we'll just get that. So went to the GameCube instead. But specifically with the GameCube, another Sonic Adventure 2 Battle is one of my favorite games of all time, but it's not just for the gameplay, it's also for the absolutely amazing and beautifully orchestrated soundtrack to that game. That's another game that, like I said with Donkey Kong Country 2, I would pause the game or listen to the official soundtrack on the game just to listen to it, just for the sake of listening to it, because I loved it. Absolutely loved the soundtrack to Sonic Adventure 2. Like, it was one of my favorites of, like, all time. So getting to, enjoy one of my favorite games is just, it was a good time. But Sonic Adventure 2 Battle is definitely one of my favorites. Now, this next game is kind of an obscure game that a lot of people don't know about, and it's called WWE Day of Reckoning 2. And there are several WWE games that came out with the GameCube, but specifically, Day of Reckoning 2 is my favorite for a couple of reasons. So, to share this story, I have to share this other story. And that's going to be, so when in 2004, about 20 years ago at the time of this recording, 20 years ago in 2004, in late 2004, WWE finally came to Corpus Christi after the American Bank Center was built. And WWE SmackDown was coming that Tuesday night. So they would record SmackDown on Tuesday nights, and then they would air it on Thursday nights is what they used to do. And then later on it would be Friday nights. And so it was one of the first events at the American Bank Center in Corpus Christi when I used to live there. And so it was going to be recorded for TV. So they were going to record it. And then, so what we actually did was me, my dad, and my sister, we all had a little fun and we decided to make wrestling posters. And so, like, those are a big part of, like at the beginning of the show when they start the show and everybody's got their signs up and all that and all this great stuff. And so I was like, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's make some posters. Not thinking, wasn't sure if they were actually going to get on TV or not. Like, I was like, maybe they might be good enough or whatever. And then sure enough, a majority of the posters actually made it to TV. Like when those specific wrestlers came out, which in this case, we made a Booker T poster, which said, "Can you dig it, sucka?" I remember that one. That was 2 posters. So I held one and then my dad held one. My dad's very supportive of my bad habits, as you can tell. So, so we did that one. And then there was a couple other ones, and then there was a point where Rob Van Dam and Eddie Guerrero, who is one of my favorite wrestlers, by the way, came out and they did their entrance. And during that time frame, of course, my dad had the Eddie Guerrero poster, and I had the Rob Van Dam poster, I believe. It might be the opposite way around. Not sure. Anyways, so those two posters got some really good TV time. Like, they actually got a steady shot of us holding those posters up during the event. And it's just crazy to me, like they got like a lot of good TV time. And so I didn't think anything of it. And then fast forward to a year later, in 2005, Day of Reckoning 2 comes out for the GameCube, the last game that would come out for the GameCube wrestling wise. And when I was playing the game, like this was the first game where like every wrestler had specific posters for those wrestlers when they would come out. So I was playing as Rob Van Dam fighting Eddie Guerrero doing Backlash 2002. And I noticed something in the crowd. And I looked closely and I noticed that my Rob Van Dam and the Eddie Guerrero posters that we made actually made it into the actual game. And it was probably one of the coolest moments of my entire life, was seeing my actual posters make it into a WWE game. And it was definitely one of the coolest moments of all time. So like it was a very surreal moment too. So that's what was really crazy about it, is that like it was just one of those very surreal moments. And so, I was really happy. I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. Should I be getting royalties for this though? But anyway, but moving on. So yeah, Day of Reckoning 2 is my favorite just because of the fact that my posters actually made it into the game, which I think is one of the absolute coolest things in the whole world. So, but yeah, so now we're going to go backwards because I forgot to talk about the Nintendo 64. Oops. So we're going to talk about that one real quick. So the Nintendo 64, when I got that one, I believe for my 9th birthday, I believe that's when I got it, because I believe it was the time I also got the Zeo Megazord too. I was also really into Power Rangers. So, with the 64, some of my favorite games. This one's definitely kind of a difficult one, but Nintendo 64, I had a lot of favorites. I wasn't very good at it, but I actually did like Donkey Kong 64. I know a lot of people are kind of like half and half on that game because of the gameplay on it. And I know for me personally, it's one of my favorites, even though I never beat it. WWF No Mercy was also another one of my favorite games too. And as you guys can tell, I'm also a big wrestling nerd. So yeah, that's like one of the definitive wrestling games of like all time. Another game that I really enjoyed is Diddy Kong Racing. I love that game. That game had I love the storyline. The repeating of a lot of the stuff that you do in the game though is one of those things that that was one of the things I didn't like about that game specifically, is that you would have to go back after you've beaten the level, then you have to go back and do it again with picking up coins, and then you have to do it again in difficult mode, and you got to do it again in backwards, and then reverse, and then up and down, left and right, A, B, start, or left, right, whatever it is. Y'all know what I'm doing. So that one is definitely one of my absolute favorites. Another one, let's see. Of course, obviously Mario 64, that's kind of a given. Mario 64 is just an amazing game overall. So, it's funny. I never really got into the Zelda games, honestly. That's why I never really mentioned them in any of my stuff whenever I talk about video games, because honestly, I never really truly got into them at all. And so, like, for me, it's just kind of like, man, that kind of sucks, it seemed like it's a cool game and all. I just could never get into it all, truthfully. But yeah, definitely. And then also the wild horse, as I call it, is Pokemon Stadium 2. Pokemon Stadium 2 is also another favorite of mine. It was cool actually being able to take your Pokemon from the actual game and then putting them into the game as well too, which I thought was super neat. Let's see. Another one probably would be, well, that's it for that one. And then we kind of go into the Wii and the Switch, which are kind of basically the same thing if you think about it. During this time frame, I didn't play games as much as I used to, and I haven't played my Switch in a while too. But when I do play Switch, I usually play like Mario Kart, or I play Smash Ultimate. So those are like really the only two games, and I've got like a lot of the retro console games on there too, like all the retro consoles on there as well. So favorite gaming console, I think honestly out of all of them, I think probably the GameCube is probably going to be my favorite one. That one was really one of my favorite ones to play when I was younger. So definitely would say the GameCube for sure. Close second is Super Nintendo. Let's see, and then when it came to like the Wii U and the Wii, it was basically like one of my favorite games was Mario Maker. I love Mario Maker, like being able to create your own levels and stuff. I have a bunch of levels still on the original Mario Maker. I want to get Mario Maker 2 so I can start developing levels on that one too, if anybody ever wants to play them. Maybe we'll get something figured out. So yeah, that's basically my loving of Nintendo and video games in general. Like I said, it's kind of a blurry state, going with all the other games and stuff, because I got like basically the same games like Mario Kart 8 and Smash Brothers and Smash Ultimate, and all that stuff is what I have on the other one too. So let's see. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our other topic that we were going to talk about during today's video. We're going to talk a little bit about music. Now, this is definitely a topic that I know that everybody can agree with, because everybody's got their music that they like to listen to. Their music that keeps them calm, that keeps them cool, keeps them collective, and for some cases keeps us all sane. So I would say let's dig deep into this, shall we? One of the first artists that I was really into when I was a kid, I remember specifically being Elvis. Because, back in the days, ChuckECheese also had that character, the king, in the restaurants. So it was kind of a given that Elvis was also going to be my favorite character. And so, remember, my parents bought me some pretty cool Elvis stuff, Elvis toys and dolls and stuff when I was pictures that I had in my walls and all that. So yeah, that was the first artist that I really enjoyed listening to. So yeah, Elvis was definitely one of the ones that I really got into. Now, it took a little while. It had been a little while, and oh, by the way, also just for the live stream chat, we are keeping the topic right now to music only. We're not taking any other questions right now. Also, thank you to everybody who has been sending gifts, by the way, during the live stream as well. But just letting y'all know that we are keeping the topics onto music only right now. We just finished talking about video games, which is the first half of the podcast. The second half is going to be about music, which we're going to talk a little bit more into that here in a moment. So most likely, yeah. So Elvis was one of my favorites. So one of my favorite Elvis songs was "Burnin' Love." Like, I absolutely love that song. Still is one of my favorites to this day. There's a lot of them though. Like almost every Elvis song I can think of are some of my absolute favorites. So another one that, for a while when I was younger, like when I started getting older, like, like 4 to, I guess, like 12 or 13, I'd really just mainly listen to the radio. So a lot of my artists are, artists from like the 90s and stuff like that. Like, trying to think, like, it's really hard to really kind of put a pinpoint because there's a lot of like one hit wonders, a lot of that kind of stuff during that time frame. So like, they're just basically almost every like 90s band or 90s group you could think of, I've listened to at least once or twice. Trying to think, like, there really wasn't like an actual group that I got into until 1999, when basically 90s Billboard at this point is basically what it was. But the big one for me was, for some reason, I just really got into Eminem. Yeah, like, I don't know, it just something about his music that just really just got me hooked. Now I will say this, when I was younger, I was not going through the stuff that he was going through, but I just really liked his music. Like My Name Is and The Real Slim Shady, and, just everything that man did during that time frame was so good. Backstreet Boys, yes. NSYNC as well too. All the groups that like Eminem used to make fun of, I actually really liked at one point. The Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, the Spice Girls, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Fred Durst. I did listen to Limp Bizkit. I'm not afraid to say that. Oh yeah, I wasn't. Okay, so it's funny because like I actually had. So when I was a kid, when you were a kid, you would always do, like, you'd always have your friends make you CDs, basically. Be like, hey, I've got this list of songs. If I pay you like $5, can you make me a CD mix with this and this and this? And that's what I did back when I was a kid, because I would never get the albums because I'd only buy them for just that one song normally. So, So one thing was like, I always would just be like, you need to make me a mix or whatever. I remember my mom had actually bought me the Marshall Mathers LP, but I would never be allowed to actually like listen to it because of one of the songs, and because of a couple of the songs on that album were, they were kind of not very nice, not so pleasant. So, they basically were just one of those like, I would never listen to that album. So I had friends make me make me mixes and stuff with those on it and stuff like that. One of my favorite Eminem tracks though, and it's kind of a weird one because it's not one that you would think is like it's not a top, like, well, not one of his biggest hits, but it was an interesting one. He did a song called "Sing for the Moment." And that song actually has a sample of an Aerosmith song called Dream On. And I don't know, to me, it was really cool hearing another song that I really liked being mixed like this. And I was like, I didn't understand what it was. I thought it was just Eminem just, being friends with Aerosmith. But yeah. Sing for the Moment is one of my favorite ones, but that song specifically is one of those songs that I'll listen to like when I need like when my vibe is low and I need something to kind of get me back into like a vibe or something. Like that's a song that just for some reason just always gets me out of like a funk basically. Like that was like one of my favorite like songs of all time. It still is. Like I'll still listen to it and it still gives me those goosebumps, man. It just really just feeds to your soul. I saw somebody saying that they are a blockhead. So, Superman's also a good song too. I remember the music video being on it for being on the 8 Mile DVD. Oh my gosh. And anyways, but yeah, so Eminem was definitely one of my favorite artists, like in the early days of his music and stuff. Another artist or another band, this is when I started kind of getting more into rock music and, soft. I guess this is considered maybe soft rock, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. But I started to really get into Creed. I had the Weathered album, and like some of the music on that album, like My Sacrifice, the song Weathered is also a really good one, because WWE used both of those songs on a video that they did, and like it just, for some reason, it just really just kind of got it was one of those songs that just really got your blood flowing on it. But yeah, like that song specifically was like one of those ones that just really just got you like into it and stuff. Trying to think. Another one that was really good was One Last Breath is also a really good song off that album too. You Stand Here With Me is also another good song on that one. But then my music, like I said, my music taste started to kind of switch gears a little bit. So I started liking other style musics and stuff like that. And another group that I really, really liked was Daft Punk. Around the World, obviously, One More Time. All those songs were just really, really well. And starting to think what else. At least from them, that's all for like the early years. And also, another one that I really, really got into was Linkin Park. Linkin Park is one of my favorite bands of all time, hands down. I really hate this, but I was actually supposed to go see them in concert when they were going to come to Dallas. They were going to come to Dallas, and they were going to do an event here. And then about 2 or 3 weeks before the event, Chester passed away. And there went my one chance of seeing my favorite band live, and I was so disappointed because I love I will say this much. Linkin Park's music got me through some dark times as a teenager. You're still trying to discover things with yourself. You're still trying to, get yourself motivated to want to graduate high school and, all this stuff. And for some reason, their music always just seemed to really just hit with me. I love all their albums. I loved Hybrid Theory. I loved Reanimation, Meteora, Minutes to Midnight, 1,000 Suns. All of those albums are good. And One More Light is also really good. I kind of fell off a little bit in some of their mid-year stuff, unfortunately, but I did at least hear the singles that they would roll out. Those were always kind of fun to listen to and stuff too, and always kind of kept me going. But it was One More Light. I finally listened to One More Light all the way, and it just it hurts me to listen to that album sometimes. Because like I remember how much, especially now, just looking back at that album, and you can tell that some of the stuff that's in that Chester's singing about is more than likely coming from the heart of what maybe he was going through during that time. And, again, I absolutely love Linkin Park. They are, again, my favorite band of all time. And I am so glad that I was able to live in a time frame where their music was very important. So I'm very fortunate to be around to be able to experience that. Definitely. Let's see. Another band that I really, really enjoy, and this band is from the 80s. It's Huey Lewis and the News. Huey Lewis did some of the best songs in the 80s, like Working for a Living, Heart of Rock and Roll. They also did Happy to Be Stuck with You, If This Is It, Doing It All for My Baby. So many, and a plethora of songs that are just so good. My favorite from them is another one of those ones that's kind of an obscure song. It's called Walking on a Thin Line. And it's a song apparently about the Vietnam War and what was going on during that time frame. And it's from the point of view of a basically of a vet from what I know, but it's a really good song, and it's one of my personal favorites, even though a lot of their other stuff is really good as well too, like Hip to Be Square and all those other amazing songs that they came out with during that time frame. Trying to think, those are really it as far as them go, as far as they go. Another artist that I'm really into as well is Marshmello. I love electronic dance music, and his music is just so good. Like from an entertainer standpoint, it's just so good. I really like also FM84. FM84 is a synthwave artist, and his music is breathtaking. Like, his music sounds like it should be in the 80s. And it's so good because it's so fun to listen to, because you're taking a trip back in time, basically, listening to that music, and you just get lost in it. And it's just one of those things where it's just absolutely amazing. Another artist that also comes to mind as well is The Midnight. They have a bunch of amazing songs as well too. One of which being Gloria, which is one of the songs that I have my show programmed to as well. I'm sure for all my friends on TikTok, they've seen me play that one millions of times, I'm sure, at this point. Another artist from that same genre is also that I really enjoy is Ollie Ride. He plays a lot of great songs, and his best song is a song called Back to Life. I recommend go give that a listen if you haven't, or if you know who it is, then go check it out for sure. But when it comes to basically that, I mean, that's like trying to think like some of my favorite actual songs. Now, I do have some favorite songs that are not by some of these artists. Like, I'm trying to think here, like one of my absolute favorite dance songs, is of course, Party Rock Anthem by LMFAO. I do actually like a lot of their music as well too. I really liked their song called La La La. It's a really good song. If you ever get the chance to listen to that one's really worth the time of like listening to. It's a really good track. I'm trying to think what other songs did they? Of course, Sorry for Party Rocking, Shots. One of the singers from that group, his name is Redfoo, came out with a song called Let's Get Ridiculous, which is another, it sounds very similar to Party Rock Anthem, but it's a really good track. Let's see, who else? There's a lot. Of course, another one that I like is Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown is one of my favorite like artists as well too. Specifically, the song "Every Little Step I Take" is one of my favorite songs of all time. Whenever I do karaoke, actually, that's another little hobby I like to do too. Is on Wednesday nights, sometimes I'll go out and sing karaoke. Sometimes there's a band that actually does what's called live band karaoke, where you do karaoke on stage with an actual band. It's probably one of the coolest things in the world. And I really love going out there and performing on stage and being able to entertain in a different aspect. It's kind of interesting, like the different like areas that I'm able to entertain in, which is really neat. I'm able to sing, I'm able to perform, I'm able to wake up characters, be behind the camera, in front of the camera. Just so many. The production episode will come eventually. By the way, we are gonna do a full episode about the production of the stuff that I've been in, like for ChuckECheese and for even some of my personal projects as well too. Somebody asked, Gamer Furry asked, how did the Song of Our People come into place? So to give a little bit more of an insight on that, because obviously not everybody knows that joke. So this is a running joke that goes on my TikTok live. A bunch of my regulars were in a live stream when I was programming a song specifically, and the song was called Big Enough, and it's also known as the screaming cowboy meme, where the cowboy's in the sky and he's doing the scream to like this EDM song basically, and like it was a well-known meme like almost like 5 or 6 years ago at the time of this recording in 2024. And one of the things was like they, it just became this joke. Like I would jokingly say, because everybody was in there, it was our song, and it was, I call them, I don't consider, everybody my fans. I consider my friends. So, all of our people in the chat and stuff. And that's kind of how that came about, was that it was just one night, a bunch of us were in there and we jokingly said, this is going to be the song of our people. And it's been literally a running joke ever since. Some people actually understand it. Some people don't, it's funny hearing other people who weren't there use the terminology, but it's funny to me because it's like, eventually I'll share the story and then they'll know what the origins of that is. But it's all good, honestly. I love the fact that, you guys can get in on the jokes as well too. And it doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like that bad or whatever. And so, yeah, that's how that rolls. Like, here's an interesting thing, is that also another big thing was also a lot of the music that I program the characters to is usually stuff that I listen to and I'm willing to listen to multiple times. Because in order to actually program these songs, you have to be willing to listen to the same song over and over and over again multiple times. So you got to make sure that what you're doing is exactly, something you can bear listening to multiple times over and over again, basically. So that's something that you have to really consider when programming these songs. You got to make sure you're willing to have to listen to that song over and over and over again and all that stuff. That's why sometimes when people recommend songs and I'm like, I'll think about it, because of the fact that I don't know if I really want to listen to that song over and over and over and over again. So it's kind of one of those things where I kind of get like, maybe not. But if you guys are ever curious to know what kind of music I listen to, if you look at the link down below, I'm going to link this in the actual video that we're going to upload at some point. There'll be a link to the Spotify playlist known as Franch Hits, which is basically a playlist of a lot of the songs that I've used on my TikTok, music that I do currently listen to, and maybe some stuff that you didn't realize I listened to. Because there's a lot, it's a very interesting mix, because it's a mixture of a lot of stuff, from, electronic dance music to hard rock music to, hip hop from the 90s, hip hop from the early 2000s, and all these other songs and stuff. And so, and of course, even ChuckECheese stuff is in there too. There's a couple of albums mixed in there as well too. So it's definitely something that worth checking out too. If you've ever been curious to know what my taste in music is like, that's basically it right there for the most part. There's still going to be adding more stuff eventually to it in due time. It's just, it takes time to really do that. So, alrighty. So I definitely think this is probably maybe a good stopping point. I think we're getting to a good stopping point now. So, this has been a lot of fun, actually, being able to, I like the fact that with this new podcast that I'm going to be able to really start opening up a lot more to you guys and really kind of showing other sides that I've never really shown before, or, you guys understand a little bit more about me because of my taste in music, or the things I listen to, or the things that I do, or the shows that I watch, or whatever the case may be. You're going to get to see other sides of me besides just the super Chucky fan, Matt. The idea, like I've said before, of this show is going to be to expand beyond that. And who knows, maybe because of this might help me come up with new content for you guys to get to actually like see me bring to life, and, new ideas might even come from these podcasts and stuff too. So want to make sure that we're doing this, So I'm not sure when this episode's going to go live yet, but we'll definitely get on that soon. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and get this bad boy wrapped up here for y'all. This has now been the conclusion of Matt the Franchise Podcast number 2. Just want to say real quick, thank you to everybody who is currently watching this on YouTube right now. I appreciate all the love and support. Thank you to my audience of people here on TikTok that are watching as well too, and also help contribute with keeping this podcast from being less boring. So in the meantime, in between time, keep on smiling and keep your head up. And we'll see you next time.